10 Tales of Christmas, Chapter 10. A Christmas Tree for Lydia. Lydia first learned about Christmas when she was 1 year old. Draped over her mother's shoulder, she drooled and stared, and the lights of the Christmas tree made other lights in her large, entranced eyes. When she was 2 years old, she learned about Santa Claus. She paid very little attention to him then, but when she was 3, she talked about him a lot, and they had difficulty persuading her that he and the infant Jesus were not father and son. By the time she was 4, she had come to accept him as one of the ordered phenomena that ruled her life, like daytime and nighttime. One 7 o'clock for getting up, and another 7 o'clock for going to bed. Like praise and blame, winter and summer, and her brother's right to seniority, and her mother's last word. Her father did not exist in her field of magnitudes. He had been killed in Casino the winter before she was born. Santa Claus will come, Lydia said, and knew it was as true as saying tomorrow will come. He will bring a Christmas tree, big, with lights, with colors. When she was 4, her brother Eddie was 9 and had long ago found out the truth concerning the matter. No speck of illusion was in his eye when he passed the street corner Santas at Christmas time, standing beside their imitation chimneys, ringing their bells. He saw them for what they were. He saw how their trousers bagged and their sleeves were too long, and how, above the false beards tied on loosely like bibs, their noses ran and their eyes looked melancholy. You'd think the kid would catch on, Eddie said to his mother one day after he'd taken a walk with Lydia. Gee, when you notice the differentness of all of them. Lydia believed in every one of them, from the bell ringers on the street corners to the department store variety, who always asked the same questions and whose hired joviality grew glassy toward evening. For Lydia, the saint was everywhere, ingenious, capable of all, and looking into the different faces of his impersonators, she beheld the one good face she had invented for him. Eddie, don't you dare tell her now, will you? His mother said. Don't you dare to now. Remember, she's only 4. Sure, let the kid have her fun, thought Eddie with large scorn and a slight compassion. He himself remembered long ago Christmas Eves when he had listened for bells in the air and watched the limp shape of his sock hung up over the stove. How can he come in through the stove, Mum? In houses like this, he comes through the window. Go to sleep now, Eddie. Eddie went to public school in the daytime, and Lydia went to a day nursery. Her mother called for her every evening on her way home from work. She was a thin, dark young woman whose prettiness was often obscured by the ragged shadows of irritation and fatigue. She loved her children, but worry gnawed at her relations with them, sharpening her words and shortening her temper. Coming home in the evening, climbing up the stairs to the flat with one hand pressing the bags of groceries to her chest, and Lydia, loitering and babbling, dragging on her other hand, she wished sometimes to let go of everything, to let go of Lydia, to let go once and for all the heavy paper bags. It would be a savage happiness, she felt, to see and hear the ketchup bottles smashing on the stairs, the eggs broken and leaking, and all the tin cans and potatoes rolling and banging their way downward. They lived in a 2-room flat with linoleum on the floor and a corrugated ceiling. In the daytime, from noon on, the rooms were hot with sunshine, but in the morning and at night they were as cold as caves, unless the stove was going. The stove in the bathtub would gulp lonesomely, and the leaky tap of the sink had a drip as perfect in tempo as a clock. And sometimes a great storming and rumbling rose in the pipes, as though they were releasing a river genie. Lydia and her mother slept in the back room, a darkish place painted blue, with a big dim mirror over the bureau and a window looking onto an air shaft. Eddie was often home alone during the first part of his vacation. At noon, wearing his blue and gray Mackinaw coat and his aviator's helmet with the straps flying, he came stamping up the stairs and into the sun-flooded, crowded little flat. Humming and snuffling, he made his lunch, breakfast food, or huge erratic sandwiches filled with the curious ingredients. When he was through, he always cleaned up, washed the bowl or dish, and swept up the breadcrumbs with his chapped hand. He had learned to be tidy at an early age, and could even make his bed well enough to sleep in it. In the afternoons and mornings, he voyaged forth with Joey Camarada and others to the streets for contests of skill and wit. Sometimes they went to the upper reaches of the park with its lakes, bridges, battlegrounds, and ambushes. On rainy days, they tagged through the museums, shrill and shabby as sparrows, touching the rattled surfaces of meteorites without awe and tipping back their heads boldly to stare at the furious mask of Tyrannosaurus Rex. "He isn't real. They made him out of pieces of wood, like," Joey said. "Men with ladders made him." "He is too real," Eddie said. "He walked around and ate and growled and everything. Once he did." "Nah, he wasn't real. He couldn't be real. You'd believe anything. You'd believe in Santa Claus even." Christmas and its symbols were more and more in their conversation as the time drew near. They speculated on the subject of possible gifts to themselves. Joey said his uncle was going to give him roller skates and a rifle. Eddie said he thought he'd probably get a bike. It was just as likely he would be given a bike as that he would be given the new moon out of the sky. But having made the statement, he went on to perfect it. He said it would be a white bike, with red trimming and a piece of red glass like a jewel on the back of it, and 2 raccoon tails floating from the handlebars. "There's going to be 2 kinds of bells on the handlebars. One will be kind of a siren. Will you let me ride it sometimes, Ed?" "Sometimes," Eddie said. That night, he rode the dream bike all around the flat with the raccoon tails flying out on the speed-torn air. The taillight blazed like a red-hot ruby, and the siren was as terrible as the human voice could make it. "Watch me now, I'm taking a curve," shouted Eddie. "Ee-oh-wee! Just missed that truck by half an inch." Lydia sat safely on the bed in the back room, questioning him as he flashed by. "Is it a plane, Eddie?" "No." "Is it a car?" "No." Is it a train?" "No. Gosh, it's a bike. Look out now, I gotta make that light. Ee-ah-wee!" "Eddie, will you please, for pity's sake, shut up?" cried his mother. "I can't even hear myself think." He came to a stop in the doorway. "Gee, Mom, what are you so cross about?" She didn't look at him. She pushed the potatoes and onions around in the frying pan with a fork. Then she shook salt over them and spoke as if from a great distance. "Close the door, Eddie. You kids don't get a tree this year." "Heck, why not? What did we do?" "We can't afford it, that's why," she said loudly, angry with him because she was hurting him. And then she lowered her voice. "They don't want me back at the store after Christmas, they told me today. They don't need me anymore. I can't get you any presents, but just things you have to have, like socks and mittens." She looked at him. "Maybe some candy," she added. A stinging hot odor rose from the frying pan to join the robust company of cooking smells from other flats on other floors, herring and chili and garlic and pork. "Gee, Eddie, I'm scared to spend another cent. How do I know I'll get another job very soon?" "What are you going to tell Lydia? She talks about the Christmas tree all day long." "She'll have to do without one, that's all. Other people will have to do without." "But gee, she talks about it all day long." His mother threw down the fork and whirled on him. "I can't help it, can I? Good heavens, what am I supposed to do?" Eddie knew better than to go on with it. He leaned against the sink and thought. And when they ate supper, he was kind and forbearing with Lydia, who was both hilarious and sloppy. After a while, his kindness became preoccupied, like that of one who drinks secretly at a spring of inspiration. And when Lydia had gone to bed, he made a suggestion to his mother. "I have an idea. If we put Christmas off for a few days, maybe a week, I can fix everything." His mother, as he had expected, said no. It was this response on the part of his mother which was the starting point of all his campaigns, many of them successful. He leaned against the sink and waited. "What good would it do? And anyway, what would Lydia think?" she said. "Tell her Santa Claus is late. Tell her we made a mistake about the day. She's too dumb to know the difference. Everyone's dumb when they're 4. And anyway, it seems kind of wrong. What would Jesus care if we put his birthday off for a couple of days?" "Oh, Eddie, don't be silly. There won't be any more money then than there is now." "No, but I got an idea. Please, Mom, please, please." Eddie knew how to pester nicely. He had a quiet, attentive, serious way of looking at one, of following a person with his eyes and not saying anything, the request still shimmering all around him like heat lightning. He waited. His mother hung up the wet dish towel and turned the dishpan upside down. She looked into the little mirror above the sink and looked away again, and then she sat down in the rocker and opened the newspaper. "Oh, all right," she said. "For pity's sake, Eddie, what do you expect, a miracle?" "Is there ever any miracles?" "Anyway, I'm not thinking about a miracle. I'm thinking about something smart," Eddie said. Christmas came, and for them it was like a day like any other, except that their mother was at home. But it was easy to explain to Lydia that this was because her job at the store had ended for good, just as it was easy to explain Lydia's own absence from nursery school by the simple method of rubbing medicated cold salve on her chest. Eddie thought of that one too. "Gee, Eddie, I hope you know what you're doing," his mother said. "I do know," Eddie said. "You should at least tell me what you're going to do." "It has to be a surprise for you too," Eddie said, not so much because he wanted to surprise his mother, as because he knew if he revealed his plan, he would come in contact with a no, which none of his stratagems could dissolve. "It will be okay, Mom." "And when is it to be, if I may ask?" "On New Year's Day, I guess," Joey said, and went in search of Joey Camarda, whose help he had enlisted. On New Year's Eve, he shut Lydia and his mother into their room. "No matter what noises you hear, you don't come out. See? Promise?" Well, his mother conceded, and that was as good as promising. She went in and shut the door, and before the extraordinary sounds of toil and shuffling commenced in the hall, she was lost in the deep sleep of the discouraged, that brief time which is free from all images of fear or joy. At midnight, the city woke up and met the new year with a mighty purring. In the streets, people blew horns and shook things that sounded like tin cans full of pebbles. Lydia woke up too and thought it was Santa Claus. "I want to get up, Mom. I want to see him." "You lie down this minute or he won't leave a single thing. He doesn't like for people to be awake when he comes," said her mother crossly, still clinging to the warm webs of sleep. But Lydia sat up for a while in her cot, rocking softly to and fro. Through the crack under the door came a fragrance. Through a fragrance she remembered well from Christmas a year ago and the Christmas before that. In the morning it was a long time before Eddie would let them out of their room. "Eddie, it's cold in here," said his mother. "I want to see the tree, I want to see the tree," chanted Lydia, half singing, half whining. "I want to see the tree, I want to see the tree." "Heck, wait a minute," said Eddie. "I want to see the tree, I want to see the tree," bade Lydia. There were sounds of haste and struggle in the next room. "All right, you can come in now," said Eddie, and opened the door. They saw a forest. In a circle, hiding every wall, stood the Christmas trees. Spare ones and stout ones, tall ones and short ones, but all tall to Lydia. Some still were hung with threads of silver foil here and there among the boughs, and Christmas ornaments for a single tree had been distributed. Calm and bright as planets, they turned and burned among the needles. The family stood in a mysterious grove without bird or breeze, and there was a deep fragrance in the room. It was the smell of health and stillness and tranquility, and for a minute or two, before she had thought of the dropping needles and the general inconvenience of a forest in the kitchen, Eddie's mother breathed the full smell into her city lungs and felt within herself a lessening of strange. "Eddie, Eddie, how? How?" "Me and Joe Camarda," Eddie whispered. "We went all around last night and dragged him out of the gutters. We could have filled the whole house with them if we wanted to. Last night in here, it was like camping out." It had been like that. He had lain peacefully in his bed under the branches, listening to the occasional snowflake tinkle of a falling needle and to the ticking of the leaky tap, hidden now as any forest spring. "Eddie, honey, look at Lydia." Lydia still looked new from her sleep. She stood with her hair rumpled and her eyes full of lights, her hands clasped in front of her in a composed, elderly way. Although she was a naturally loud, exuberant child, the noise had temporarily been knocked out of her. "All the Christmas trees," she said gently. "Gee," said Eddie, "don't get the idea that it's going to be this way every year. This is just because he was late, and it's instead of presents. It was enough for Lydia. Anyone could see that. In a way, it was enough for Eddie, too. He felt proud, generous, and efficient. He felt successful. With his hands in his pockets, he stood looking at his sister. All the Christmas trees, Lydia said quietly and sighed. All the Christmas trees. By Elizabeth Enright.